Here's the situation. I grew up in a pretty messed up family. My dad left when I was 10 with no real explanation, just walked out on us, leaving my mom and me behind. After he left, things were rough for a while, but my mom eventually remarried when I was around 15. Her new husband, let's call him Steve, wasn't a bad guy, but he made it clear from the start that I wasn't his kid. He never said it outright, but it was like I was just my mom's baggage, not really part of his new family. Steve wasn't awful to me or anything, but I could tell I was more of a guest in the house, especially once my mom and Steve had 2 kids together, my half-brother and half-sister. They were his world. Meanwhile, I felt like I was just in the background, watching them play happy family while I tried to figure out where I fit. My mom didn't seem to care either. She was too wrapped up in her new life with Steve and the kids. I don't know if she just assumed I didn't need her anymore or if she really didn't notice how left out I felt, but she never made an effort to include me. It was like she had her new family and I was just extra. I became pretty independent because I had no choice. I spent a lot of time alone doing my own thing, while Steve and my mom focused on their little family unit. High school was okay, I guess. I focused on my grades, sports, and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life, mainly as a distraction from home. I wasn't close to my mom or Steve by that point. I didn't cause any trouble or make waves, but I also wasn't going to be part of the family dynamic they had going. When I was 17, I got a part-time job, which kept me busy and out of the house more. I wasn't planning to stick around after high school anyway. My plan was simple: go to college, get a degree, and get as far away from that house as possible. Things got real the summer after my freshman year of college. I came home excited to have a break, maybe catch up with friends and relax a little. But my welcome home wasn't exactly warm. My mom seemed indifferent, like she wasn't thrilled I was back. And about a week after I got home, she sat me down at the kitchen table for the talk. I remember that night so clearly. I thought we were going to talk about something simple, like maybe I needed to help out more around the house. But no, she dropped a bombshell instead. "I think it would be best if you didn't come home anymore," she said, just like that. No real explanation. She told me the house was too crowded, and my half-brother and half-sister needed more space. Basically, they didn't have room for me anymore. I was shocked. My mom was kicking me out, not even a year after I started college. I wasn't a problem kid. I paid for my own stuff. I stayed out of the way, so I didn't understand what I had done wrong. But clearly I was no longer part of their plans. I didn't argue. I didn't beg her to reconsider. I just nodded, went to my room, packed my stuff, and left. I didn't even say goodbye to Steve or my half-siblings. I doubt they noticed I was gone. After that, I cut contact. I blocked her number and never spoke to her or Steve again. The only person from my old life I stayed in touch with was my half-sister Holly. She was young and kept reaching out, trying to keep some kind of connection, so I'd text her here and there, but that was it. I had no interest in rekindling anything with my mom or Steve. The first few months after being kicked out were tough. I stayed with a friend, then eventually managed to get a small apartment near my college campus. It wasn't easy balancing work and school, but I got through it. I'd been emotionally on my own for years, so the transition wasn't as bad as you'd think. It still hurt, though, knowing that my mom just didn't care. It took me a while to stop wondering why they didn't care, but eventually, I realized it wasn't my fault. I wasn't the problem, they were. They chose to shut me out, and that was on them, not me. I had no control over their choices, so I stopped beating myself up about it. Then, a few years later, I met Sarah. Sarah was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. Kind, understanding, and supportive. She had a great family too, the type of family that does Sunday dinners, remembers every birthday, and genuinely cares about each other. Her family welcomed me in right away, no questions asked. For the first time, I felt like I had a real family. Sarah knew all about my messed up relationship with my mom and Steve. She didn't push me to reconnect with them, which I appreciated. She just let me handle it in my own way. When Sarah and I got engaged, it was the happiest time of my life. We'd been together for 4 years, and planning the wedding felt like the next step in building a life together. I was excited. We were excited. We started talking about venues, guest lists, and all the usual wedding stuff. It felt like I was finally creating something for myself that had nothing to do with my past. Then one night, as we were going over the guest list, Sarah asked, "So, who do you want to invite from your side?" I started naming some close friends, people from college, and a few coworkers. I didn't even think about inviting my family because, to be honest, they weren't really part of my life anymore. But then Sarah asked, "What about your parents?" I froze for a second. I hadn't even considered inviting them. Why would I? These were the people who'd kicked me out and never made any effort to fix things. I looked at Sarah and said, "I'm not inviting them." I thought that was the end of the conversation. Sarah knew the basics of my family situation, so I figured she'd understand. But Sarah's family is close-knit, the kind where everyone's involved in each other's lives. I don't think she fully grasped how deep the issues with my family went, not because she didn't care, but because she hadn't experienced anything like it. So she asked, "Are you sure? It's your wedding." I wasn't angry, but I was a little frustrated. I explained how they had kicked me out when I was 19, how they never reached out, never made any effort to reconnect. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I just didn't want them in my life. Sarah seemed to understand, and I thought we were on the same page. But then, a couple of days later, as we were finalizing the guest list, she brought it up again. "Are you really sure you don't want to invite them? You might regret it later." That's when I started getting frustrated. I love Sarah, but it felt like she wasn't listening. I kept calm and told her again that inviting my family would only bring stress and drama. I didn't want my mom there, pretending everything was fine, acting like she hadn't abandoned me. It would just ruin the day for me. Sarah nodded and dropped it for the moment, but I could tell it was still on her mind. I started wondering why this was such a big deal to her. It's my family, and it's my decision, right? It started eating at me, making me second-guess myself. But every time I thought about it, I'd remember all the crap I went through with them, and I knew I wasn't being too harsh. A few days later, we were about to send out the save the dates, and Sarah brought it up one last time. "Are you really sure? I just feel like you'll regret it if you don't invite them." That's when I snapped. I didn't see it coming. When Sarah asked again if I was sure about not inviting my family, something inside me just broke. I hadn't planned on it, but all of a sudden I was standing up shouting, "If you can't respect what I've been through, then maybe we shouldn't be getting married at all." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Sarah looked stunned, and honestly I was too. I'd never spoken to her like that before. I didn't even know where that outburst had come from. I wasn't just angry, I was hurt. It felt like she wasn't on my side, like she didn't get how much pain I carried from my past. I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house. I didn't have a plan, I just needed space. I couldn't sit there and argue about something that, to me, wasn't up for debate. I drove around for a while, my mind racing, trying to make sense of everything. I kept replaying our conversation over and over. Why couldn't she just trust me on this? Why was she pushing so hard for me to invite people who didn't care about me? I knew Sarah wasn't trying to hurt me, but it felt like she wasn't listening, like she couldn't understand the years of rejection and hurt that came with my family. Eventually, I parked in some quiet spot and sat in the car, staring out the window. I tried to calm myself down, but it wasn't easy. The memories of being kicked out, of my mom choosing Steve and their new life over me, all came flooding back. It wasn't about the wedding, it was about everything that had come before. The years of feeling like I didn't matter, of being cast aside by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. After a couple of hours, I drove back home. It was late when I got there, and Sarah had already gone to bed. I didn't want to wake her up, so I crashed on the couch. But I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the argument. I knew I'd hurt her by walking out like that, and I felt guilty for it. We were supposed to be a team, but I'd bailed the moment things got tough. The next morning, Sarah left for work without saying much. I could tell she was upset, and I didn't blame her. I felt like I'd let her down by not handling the situation better. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't wrong about my family. They didn't deserve a place in my life just because there was a big event happening. You don't get to throw someone away and then show up when it's convenient. That day, I sat around trying to figure out how to talk to Sarah. I knew we needed to have a serious conversation, but I didn't want it to turn into another argument. Part of me thought maybe I should let things cool off for a bit, but the other part of me knew we couldn't ignore this. We had to deal with it head on. By the time Sarah usually gets home around 5:30, I was still working from home, finishing up some stuff and waiting for her to walk through the door. I was nervous. I knew I had overreacted the night before, but I was still upset about the whole situation with my family. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about whether Sarah really understood what my family had done to me. 5:30 rolled around and no Sarah. Not too unusual, but by 6 o'clock I started to wonder if she was avoiding me. I shot her a quick text asking if everything was okay, but there was no response. Then, around 6:15, I heard the door open. But it wasn't just Sarah who walked in, it was my half-sister, Holly. I stood there in shock. Holly and I barely spoke, and she lived nearly an hour away. What was she doing here? And why was she with Sarah? The look on Sarah's face told me she knew this wasn't going to go well. And Holly? She looked nervous, like she knew she was walking into a bad situation. Before I could even ask what was going on, Holly burst into tears, full-on sobbing. And honestly, I didn't feel much for her in that moment. I knew that sounded cold, but after everything that had happened with my family, seeing her cry didn't exactly stir any sympathy in me. Sarah gave me a pleading look, as if to say, "Please don't make this worse." But I was already frustrated, and now I was just confused. Holly started apologizing between sobs, saying, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for things to get this bad." I didn't even know what she was apologizing for yet, but her crying was making it hard to understand anything she was saying. After a few minutes of her trying to collect herself, she finally explained. Apparently, when she told my mom and Steve that I was engaged, it stirred up all kinds of drama, though not for the reasons you'd think. It had nothing to do with my mom or Steve actually caring about me or being happy for me. No, it was all about my half-brother Ryan, who was 26 at the time, was still living at home, jobless, and doing nothing with his life. I hadn't talked to him in years, but from what Holly said, he had basically been freeloading off my mom and Steve for years. They had kicked me out at 18, but here was Ryan, still living there at 26 with no job and no plan. My mom wanted him out of the house, but Steve wouldn't let her kick him out, so they were fighting over it. And here's the kicker. My mom and Steve were separated because of it. Yep, their marriage was falling apart because of my brother's laziness. And somehow, my engagement had stirred all this up, because now my mom felt like a failure as a parent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wedding, my engagement had nothing to do with their drama. I hadn't spoken to them in years, and yet here they were, dragging my engagement into their mess. And the wildest part? My mom was convinced that being invited to my wedding would somehow fix everything. She thought that if she and Steve got invited, they'd come together, see me, and all the family issues would magically disappear. I couldn't hold back anymore. I looked Holly dead in the eye and said, "This has nothing to do with me. My engagement has nothing to do with their issues. If they're fighting over Ryan, that's on them. It's not my responsibility to fix their problems, and I'm not turning my wedding into some kind of therapy session for them." Holly cried harder, saying she didn't mean to upset me, that she was just trying to help. But I was done. This was exactly why I had cut contact with them in the first place. They didn't care about me. They just wanted to drag me into their problems, and I wasn't having it. Sarah stayed quiet, watching this unfold. Normally, she'd try to mediate, but I think she saw how upset I was and decided to let me handle it. When Holly finally stopped crying, I asked her, "Why are you even here? You know I don't talk to Mom or Steve. You know I've moved on. So why bring this to my doorstep?" That's when Sarah spoke up. She admitted that Holly had been texting her for months, telling her that deep down, I wanted to reconcile with my family. Holly had been feeding Sarah all these lies about how I was just too proud to admit it, how I secretly missed them, and how I'd regret not inviting them to the wedding. Sarah, being the kind-hearted person she is, thought she was helping me by bringing it up over and over again. She didn't realize she was being manipulated. I was furious. I couldn't believe my own sister was lying about me like that, trying to push me into doing something I clearly didn't want. And Sarah, bless her heart, had fallen for it. She thought she was doing the right thing by trying to get me to reconsider. But now that everything was out in the open, I just felt betrayed. Not only by Holly, but by Sarah too, for going behind my back and believing those lies. I told Holly to leave. I didn't want to hear any more apologies or excuses. She tried to argue, saying she was just trying to help, but I wasn't interested. She left, still crying, but I didn't care anymore. I was done with her. I blocked her number that night and decided I wasn't going to speak to her again. As for Sarah, well, we weren't in a great place after that. She knew she had messed up by trusting Holly over me, but I wasn't sure how to move forward. I loved her, but my trust had taken a big hit. I didn't know if we could come back from this, but I knew we had to try. After Holly left, I sat there feeling like I'd just been hit by a truck. I'd stood my ground and sent her away, but the whole situation left a bitter taste in my mouth. I wasn't angry at Sarah anymore, not really, but I still felt the sting of betrayal. It wasn't just about Holly showing up. It was the fact that Sarah had been talking to her behind my back for months, believing her over me. I didn't know how to move forward, but I knew we had to have a serious conversation if there was any chance of fixing this. We didn't talk about it right away. The room was filled with this heavy tension, both of us avoiding eye contact, unsure of what to say next. I stayed quiet for a while, trying to figure out where to start without it turning into another argument. Sarah was sitting across from me, looking down at her hands, clearly upset. I wasn't mad at her anymore, but I needed to understand why she hadn't trusted me. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. I quote, "Sorry," she whispered, her voice soft and shaky. "I didn't mean for things to get like this. I thought I was helping." I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. I didn't want to yell or say something I'd regret, but I also couldn't just let this go without addressing it. "Why didn't you talk to me?" I asked. "You know me better than anyone. Why would you believe what Holly was saying instead of coming to me first?" Sarah looked up at me, her eyes already teary. "I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I thought you were just too hurt to admit that you missed them. I mean, you never really talk about your family, and I just assumed. I thought deep down, maybe you wanted to fix things with them." I didn't realize how bad it was. That hit me hard. I realized then that maybe I hadn't been as open with Sarah as I thought I had. Sure, she knew the basics, how my mom had kicked me out and how I'd cut contact, but I hadn't really explained how much it had affected me or how deeply those wounds ran. Maybe part of this was my fault for not fully opening up to her, but it didn't change the fact that she'd let Holly manipulate her. "I get that you were trying to help," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I've told you over and over again that I don't want anything to do with them. I'm not secretly hoping for some big family reunion. I don't need them in my life. You should have trusted me when I said that." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "You're right, I should have. I don't know. I've never dealt with anything like this. My family's always been so close, and I guess I couldn't wrap my head around the idea that you wouldn't want to make things right with yours. But now I see it's not the same. Your family isn't like mine. That was the truth. Sarah's family was picture perfect, with parents who loved each other and siblings who got along. They had their issues, sure, but nothing like the mess I had grown up in. I couldn't blame her for not fully understanding, but it didn't make it hurt any less. "I just need you to believe me when I tell you something," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Even if it doesn't make sense to you, even if it's different from what you're used to, I need you to trust that I know what's best for me when it comes to my family." Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'll never go behind your back like that again. I promise." I squeezed her hand, feeling the tension between us start to ease. I knew this wasn't going to fix everything right away, but it was a start. At the end of the day, I loved Sarah, and I knew she loved me. We'd been through a lot together, and this was just another challenge we'd have to work through. After a few minutes of sitting in silence, I finally asked, "So what do we do now?" It felt like the big question that had been hanging over us for days. Sarah sighed softly, her thumb rubbing the back of my hand gently. "Well," she said, "we still need to talk about the wedding. I know we've put it off because of everything that's happened, but we can't ignore it forever. She was right. The wedding plans had come to a screeching halt as soon as all the family drama blew up. We hadn't sent out the save the dates yet, and the guest list was still sitting there unfinished. But I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want my mom, Steve, or my half-brother anywhere near our wedding. I don't want them at the wedding, I said firmly. My mom, Steve, my brother, they don't get to be there, not after everything they've done. I get that, Sarah replied, and I'm not going to push you anymore. It's your family, your call. I just wanted to make sure you were absolutely sure about it. I quote am sure, I said. If they want to be in my life, they'll have to earn that spot. But I'm not giving them an invitation just because it's a big day. They haven't earned it and they don't deserve it. Sarah nodded, and I could see the understanding in her eyes. Okay, we'll move forward without them. The next few days were kind of a blur. We started to move forward with the wedding plans, but the energy around it felt different. There was this lingering tension between us. We weren't fighting anymore, but things still felt off. You know that weird feeling when you and someone you care about have made up, but it's not quite back to normal yet? Yeah, that's where we were. I tried to throw myself into work to keep my mind busy, but every now and then I'd catch myself thinking about everything that had happened. I was still angry at Holly for showing up unannounced and stirring up all this drama. I couldn't believe she'd thought my wedding would be some kind of family therapy session, where all our problems would magically be fixed. That was the thing with my family. They always swept issues under the rug and pretended everything was fine. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. Sarah and I agreed to move forward with the wedding plans, but it didn't feel as exciting as it once did. Before all this, we were buzzing with excitement about venues, flowers, and all the typical wedding stuff. Now it felt like we were just trying to get through it, and I hated that. I didn't want my wedding to be overshadowed by the mess with my family. I wanted it to be about us, about the life we were building together, not about them. One evening, Sarah suggested we sit down and officially finish the guest list. I wasn't exactly in the mood, but I knew we had to get it done. So we sat at the kitchen table, the list in front of us, and started going through the names. I couldn't help but glance at the empty spaces where my mom, Steve, and Ryan's names could have been. I didn't feel any guilt about leaving them off. If anything, it felt like the right call. Sarah must have noticed the look on my face because she reached over and squeezed my hand. You okay? She asked, her voice soft. Yeah, I nodded. I'm good. It's just weird, I guess, seeing those empty spots. I know, she said, but you're doing the right thing. I knew she was right, but it was still strange. Most people invite their parents to their wedding. It's just how things usually go. But I wasn't most people. My relationship with my family wasn't normal, and I had to accept that. Once we finished the guest list, we moved on to some of the more fun stuff, picking out the cake, talking about music for the reception. It felt good to finally focus on the wedding again without my family's shadow hanging over it. For the first time in days, Sarah and I were laughing and joking around, and things felt normal again. We were back to being us, the couple excited about getting married and building a life together. But of course, nothing ever stays simple for long. Just when I thought things were settling down, I got a text from an unknown number a few days later. My gut told me it was my mom, but I opened it anyway. Sure enough, it was her. The message started with, I heard you're getting married. I hope we can talk. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of how she'd kicked me out, ignored me for years, or how I wasn't part of their lives anymore. Just the same old attitude, acting like nothing had happened, like she could just pop back into my life whenever she felt like it. I didn't respond. I blocked the number immediately. I wasn't going to let her worm her way back in. Not now, not ever. I had made the decision to move forward without her, without Steve, without Ryan, and I wasn't about to change my mind just because she decided she wanted to act like a mother again. She'd had plenty of chances and she blew them all. When Sarah came home that evening, I told her about the message. She was supportive as always, but I could tell she was worried. I think a part of her was afraid that my mom might show up uninvited or cause some sort of scene at the wedding. To be honest, that thought had crossed my mind too. It wouldn't be the first time my family pulled something dramatic out of the blue, but I reassured her, if my mom shows up, we'll deal with it. I'm not going to let her ruin our day. As the wedding got closer, things started feeling real again. We sent out the invitations, booked the caterer, and confirmed the last details. All the big stuff was finally falling into place, and I was starting to get excited again. For a while I'd been so caught up in the family drama that I'd forgotten what this day was supposed to be about. Me and Sarah starting our life together, This wasn't just going to be a party. It was going to be a fresh start, a new chapter in my life, and I couldn't wait. The morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling nervous, but not because of my family. It was the usual pre-wedding jitters, excitement mixed with a bit of anxiety. I kept thinking about how far I'd come and how I'd managed to build a life that was truly mine, separate from all the baggage of my past. I'd worked hard to get to this point, and now, standing on the edge of a new beginning, it felt good knowing this day was about celebrating the future Sarah and I were going to create together. The ceremony itself was perfect. We exchanged vows and rings, and when I looked at Sarah standing in front of me, I felt this overwhelming sense of peace. No matter what happened with my family or anything else, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. This is my life now. I had built it with my own hands, and no one, not my mom, not Steve, not my brother, was going to take that away from me. At the reception, we danced, laughed, and spent time with our friends and Sarah's family. There were no interruptions, no drama, just a beautiful day filled with love and happiness. For the first time in a long time, I felt free from the weight of my past, free from the expectations of people who had never really cared about me. I didn't need their approval, and I didn't need them in my life. Everything I needed was right in front of me. Looking back now, I'm glad I stood my ground. I'm glad I didn't cave to the pressure of doing what's normal or what people think a family should be. I made the decision that was right for me, for my mental health, and for my future, and that's all that matters in the end. I don't know if I'll ever hear from my mom or the rest of my family again, and honestly, I don't care. My life is good now. I'm married to the love of my life, surrounded by people who truly love and support me. That's the only family I need. It's been a long road to get here, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that feels pretty damn good. Story 2. If we don't indulge his 6 kids too, our ex-son-in-law threatened to cut us off from our grandchildren. You never imagine that you will be the one to lose a child since you are aware of what occurs to other people. Either you know someone who knows someone, or you hear about it in the news. However, when it occurs to you, Guy, it affects you in a like that nothing else can. My youngest child, Brianna, was the joy of our family. She was one of those individuals who, upon entering a space, instantly brought it to life. Before you ever saw her, you could hear her laughing. And you just can't picture anything taking it away from you as a mother. You've always assumed that you'll be the one to take care of them when they're elderly and wrinkled. However, comma plans don't really matter in life, do they? When Brianna fell ill, Zach and Mia were just 8 and 9 years old. Not just a little ill either. I'm talking about the sort of illness where you're in the hospital every other day and have lost all memory of what normal feels like. It did not take long to see that she was not going to walk away from this. Kevin, her husband, left early. Though he was physically present, it seemed as though he was unable to cope. He ceased being present for her in the meaningful ways. I am not here to criticize him. Well, I could be, but this is like when your wife is going through the most difficult thing she has ever experienced. That's when you take charge, correct? Kevin, didn't he just sort of dump all of that on us? It was my husband and I that took her to her treatments, kept an eye on the kids, and tried to keep things together. One of the final discussions I had with Brianna is one I will never forget. She was exhausted, not just from her illness, but also from her constant concern for her children's future once she was gone. She confided in me that she was afraid Kevin would replace her, that the kids would forget her when he brought in a new lady. And man, when your child gives you that terrified, defenseless expression, you make commitments that you never imagined being required to make. I assured her that Zach and Mia would always have our support and that we would make sure they never forgot their mother and how much she loved them. She got me to pledge that we would always watch out for them. I also did. When she eventually went away, I meant it too. I have no idea how to describe it. It feels as though your heart was once a giant hole in your chest, and nothing is able to fill it. But for Zach and Mia, we had to hold strong. We were all that remained of their mother, and we destroyed them. I recall Zach holding onto Brianna's hand long after she had left, like he believed she would stay if he simply grabbed on hard enough. For weeks, Mia seldom said anything at all. My heart shattered again seeing how they grieved. We made an effort to keep everything cohesive. However, Kevin, this man took a lady named Cindy into their home 8 months after Brianna died. The first time Zach and Mia informed me about her, I can still clearly recall. They were afraid to even mention her name, as if discussing her was a betrayal of their mother. I'll be honest, even before I met her, I detested her. Not for who she was, but rather for what she stood for. It happened too quickly. Before a year had passed after Brianna left, he was already living with someone else. It resembled a blow to the face. And Cindy, of course, had her own baggage. Not only did she have a child from a previous relationship, but she was also carrying Kevin's child. It resembled a slow-motion train disaster. But Cindy wasn't the worst thing. It was the way Kevin behaved, as though this was standard behavior. As if it were our collective responsibility to act as though this were a logical development. He even dared to propose that we care for Cindy's child as if it were our own grandchild. I adore children now. Having raised 3 of them, I would do everything for my grandkids. To be clear though, Cindy's child was not my granddaughter. I was not going to sit there and act different. However, Kevin made the really wise decision to establish certain guidelines. He added that we had to take Cindy's child as part of the package if we wanted to stay in Zach and Mia's life. Really, are you serious? We could not risk losing our friendship with Zach and Mia if we did not treat her child as if it were our own. He made an effort to present it as being entirely about allowing the children to create new family ties without our intervention. However, I saw through that nonsense. He was attempting to erase Brianna's memories. This new woman and her children were what he wanted to take her place. Furthermore, I wasn't in charge of it. Not in a manner. We had ourselves a corner at that time. More than everything, we were in love with Zach and Mia, and the thought of losing them was intolerable. So we had a legal consultation. We pursued obtaining visitation privileges for our grandparents after learning that we could. Yes, it was a difficult and disorganized procedure. Nevertheless, we ultimately achieved our goals. Zach and Mia's time. At first, it wasn't that much, just occasional weekends. However, it was sufficient to maintain that bond. And let me tell you, Zach and Mia expressed their disinterest in their dad's new family right away. When they arrived at our place, they felt as though a burden had been removed. They didn't have to act like everything was fine or play nice with Cindy. They might just be who they are. They wouldn't feel bad about discussing their mother or laughing over bygone times. But Kevin never got into it. Every time he picked them up or dropped them down, I could see it. He resented that they weren't developing a relationship with Cindy's child or the new infant. However, it wasn't my issue. Zach and Mia were all that worried me. I wasn't going to allow anyone take them away from me since they were my family. Once Kevin included Cindy in the picture, things got extremely heated. But when he began pushing this package deal crap, that's what really turned things up a level. Initially, I believed that he could be attempting to combine their families, but that wasn't the case. It seemed more like he wanted to start over and forget about the past, which included removing all memories of their mother, Brianna, that Zach and Mia had of her. He seemed to be asking us to act as though Brianna had never happened, as if her passing provided him with an unhindered opportunity to do everything he pleased. Kevin tells me over the phone one day that he wants to arrange a family meeting. That sounded worse than it should have. Kevin's family gatherings always signaled the beginning of some new practical joke or guilt trip. I didn't want to say no, though. I continued to attempt to keep things polite enough for Zach and Mia. When my husband and I arrive at their home, Cindy is seated at the table with her child on her lap, appearing to be in need of some serious conversation. I had a gut feeling that this would not end well. Kevin greets the children with great courtesy, expressing how difficult life has been for them since Brianna's death, and how much he values our presence in their lives. As I sat there, I consider what the catch may be. Then he lets it down. Cindy and I want to ensure that all the children grow up as one big happy family, he continues. And in order for it to occur, your help is required. I waited for him to grow serious while I sat there. We want you to start treating Cindy's daughter like she's your grandchild, he continues. We've become a bundle deal, and Zach and Mia will find it quite difficult if you can't accept that. My blood pressure started to rise. What am I getting at? At first, I wasn't even sure how to reply. This person was telling us that we had to treat Cindy's child, who has no connection to us, as if she were our own if we wanted to see our own grandchildren. "I apologize, but that's not how this operates." Always the more composed one, my spouse made an effort to remain composed. "We are and always will be here for Zach and Mia," he stated. "We can't, however, act as though our grandchildren are someone else's kids. That is not how it operates." Kevin was not pleased with that response. In a split second, his entire attitude transformed. From being Mr. Polite, he became blatantly enraged. "If you can't accept this family, maybe you shouldn't be a part of it at all," he shouted, slamming his fist down on the table. At this time, I was furious. "Excuse me, but we've been here for Zach and Mia from the beginning. When you weren't, we were there. And now you want to tell us that until we live out this ideal of yours, we have no place in their life." At last, Cindy, who had been sitting there silently the entire time, spoke out. "We just want what's best for the kids," she added. "They require stability, and adopting this new family dynamic is a necessary part of it. Though we don't intend to take Brianna's place, we must proceed." I was enraged by her bold statement, as if she hadn't abruptly entered the scene just a year after Brianna's passing. Although I realized it would not assist Zach and Mia, I still wanted to shout and holler. "We quote here for our grandchildren, and nothing will change that," I added, taking a long breath. "However, we are not here to pretend to be a child's playmate." Kevin merely looked at me as if he was in disbelief that I was refusing to back down. Then he said something that I will always remember. "You will lose us all if you are unable to embrace us all," he warned. It was akin to a gut punch. This guy really threatened to take our grandchildren away if we didn't follow his guidelines. My spouse seemed to be thinking the same thing I was when I glanced across at him. We could not allow that to occur. However, I also refused to allow Kevin to trick us into acting as though nothing was genuine. I wasn't going to pretend that Cindy's child was our granddaughter merely to appease Kevin. She wasn't. Basically, the remainder of the conference was a stalemate. Kevin and I were not going to back down. We were obviously not going to reach a consensus that day. As a result, we departed not really knowing what would come next. It was a calm journey home. Despite our lack of conversation, I could tell my spouse and I had the same concern. What if Kevin did in fact break up with Zach and Mia? What would happen if he carried out his threat? Kevin gave us a call after a few days. He threatened to withhold our ability to see the children unless we complied with his demands. It was all we had feared. Although my heart ached, I wasn't going to allow him to intimidate us into complying. We then made the decision to consult a lawyer. Although we knew we had to battle for Zach and Mia, it wasn't an easy choice. We refused to fall for Kevin's package deal fantasy. Therefore, we weren't going to let him take them away from us. Because of our personal relationship with Zach and Mia and our level of involvement in their lives, our lawyer advised us that we had a strong case for grandparents' visiting rights. Although difficult, we still had a shot. Kevin lost it when we informed him we were going to file a lawsuit. He claimed that we didn't care about what was best for the kids and were attempting to ruin his new family. However, I knew that was untrue. We were prepared to battle for Zach and Mia because we loved them more than anything else. Although the legal procedure was arduous and protracted, we ultimately achieved our desired outcome: rights to see Zach and Mia. Though it wasn't as much as we had previously, it was still sufficient. The nicest thing was that Zach and Mia expressed their want to remain in our life. Their dad's new family and his threats meant nothing to them. The only thing that mattered was that they loved us. As soon as we resolved our visiting rights, Kevin's world began to shift, and not in a positive way. But I wasn't shocked. I always had a gut sense that one day his decisions would come back to haunt him. You can't just destroy your family and act as though nothing happened. To begin with, Kevin lost any ties with his own family. Following his actions, his parents and siblings all separated themselves. They had always been close to Brianna, so they weren't happy with how quickly he moved on. He plays home with Cindy and her child one day and buried his wife the next. I suppose his parents began to withdraw from his life because they couldn't accept it. He was barely communicating with them, and when he did, it was only to argue about how he was managing things. To be honest, that's when I noticed how chaotic Kevin's life had been. Losing your wife is one thing, but it's your fault if you end up alienating your entire family in the process. It's not like I felt sorry for him, though at the same time, I understood this was hurting more than just him. I was still upset with him for attempting to dictate how we were meant to behave around Zach and Mia. Zach and Mia were also being pulled down by it. Then there was Cindy's family, and believe me, they were as aloof. I may not be fully informed, but my understanding is that Cindy's family wasn't very happy with her involving Kevin. They were never close in the first place, and it appeared as though they had distanced themselves from her now that she was living with a man who had his own problems. Kevin was now stranded in this home with 6 children, and nobody was prepared to assist him. He was alone with Cindy, and to be honest, they were both going down. I occasionally received brief reports on how things were going at home from Zach and Mia. They seldom voiced complaints directly, but clearly things weren't going well. Zach said that Cindy's first child from her previous relationship was exhibiting a lot of behavioral issues. The poor child, I suppose, was perplexed and unsure of her place in this chaotic blended household. She did, after all, have her mother, but her father was no longer in the picture, and she was living with Kevin, who most likely treated her the same way we did not like our daughter. A child's mind is disturbed by such type of thing. Then there were the 2 brand new children. Zach and Mia were attempting to keep their heads down and survive, while Kevin and Cindy, who are both less than 5, were racing about the home. They clearly weren't a true member of that new family, not Cindy's children, but Brianna's, and it was obvious where the lines were drawn, despite Kevin's best efforts to pitch that package offer. Initially, I was afraid that Zach and Mia might start to distance themselves from us due to everything. They can start to identify more with their dad's new family or feel guilty for not developing a close relationship with their half-siblings. But no, they actually want more time spent with us. By then, they were both adolescents, and teenagers tend to know the kind of people they want to hang out with. Nor was it Cindy or Kevin. They would constantly contact to see if they could spend the weekend with us or stay during breaks. Naturally, we always said yes. While Zach and Mia were with us, we made sure they had all they needed. We didn't want their broken family situation to make them feel as though they were losing out on anything. Admittedly, we spoilt them a bit more than some grandparents may have. But we had to, I thought. After all they'd been through, they earned it. Kevin, even if that did not make him pleased, he made it plain that, in his opinion, we were giving them too much and making their life too simple. He said that we were undermining his parenting and that kids needed to learn responsibility. As soon as he said it, I nearly laughed. For all that, what parenting was he even discussing? Based on what I could observe, not that he was doing much of it. Zach once dropped by our house to show me some new sneakers Kevin had given him. They broke down in a matter of weeks and were inexpensive. Zach didn't seem to be complaining, but it was obvious he felt ashamed. At that point, I took him out and bought him a real pair of shoes, ones that would endure. When Kevin subsequently learned about it, he became quite upset. He said that we were defaming him in front of his own kid. The problem is that I had no intention of bringing him up. All I wanted was something respectable for Zach. That was the kind of thing that really got to Kevin. It irritated him. Spending time with us delighted Zach and Mia more than spending time with him. Furthermore, it went beyond material possessions. They could unwind, be themselves, and leave the commotion going on at home behind when they came to our property. That was the main thing that worried Kevin. Kevin attempted to hold us responsible for his loss of control over his own family more and more. He would remark things like, "They're never going to respect me as their father," or, "You're spoiling them and it's making them ungrateful. I'm trying to teach them, but you keep ruining everything." In reality, though, what was he teaching them? How can one cope with a chaotic household where step-siblings come and go without much help? Yes. Thank you, not at all. When Zach and Mia informed Kevin that they no longer wanted to be around their younger siblings, things reached a breaking point. It was excessive. They claimed it seemed like they were constantly the babysitters, leaving Kevin and Cindy to take care of the younger children. Whatever it was, they did it. That's when Kevin went completely crazy. It dawned on him that the joyful, large family he had been pressuring didn't exist. His younger children weren't receiving the necessary care, and his older children didn't want to be involved. It was an absolute disaster. Kevin could feel the walls closing in on him by now. Now that his and Cindy's families had departed, Zach and Mia were trying to spend as much time as possible apart from him. He was alone and unsure of how to deal with it. He attempted to scare us into assisting with the other kids more and more as he became more desperate. "You are destroying this family," he continued, "because if you truly cared about Zach and Mia, you would also care about their siblings. However, I didn't purchase it. We had no business cleaning up his mess. Zach and Mia needed our support, and that was not going to change. One weekend while Zach and Mia were visiting with us, everything came to a head. It felt like they were avoiding their own place completely, the more time they'd been spending with us lately. Of course, it didn't bother me. They appeared happier here than they were at home, which was wonderful to have around. However, I was aware that Kevin would eventually raise a fuss over it. Sure enough, Kevin arrived unexpectedly that Saturday afternoon. He stormed in as if he was the owner, not even bothered to knock. I heard the front door slam while I was in the kitchen, and when I went to investigate, I saw him standing in the center of the living room, wearing a furious expression. "How in the world is this happening?" he made a demand. "Why are my kids here all the time?" The tension in the room was immediately apparent to me. Sitting on the couch, eyes wide, Zach and Mia remained silent. Trying to maintain composure, my husband got up from his chair, but it was obvious he was annoyed with Kevin for barging in. I didn't say anything, but I also didn't back down. I stated to Kevin, "They want to be here. You know they're welcome here at any moment." Kevin paced back and forth and shook his head. "This is incorrect. It's not your kids. They're mine. Instead of hiding out here all the time, they need to be spending time with their siblings and relatives." Zach got up at this moment, obviously unhappy. "Dad, we're not hiding. All we want is some room." Kevin reddened in the face as he turned on him. "From what space? Your own household. Your siblings no longer even know you since you spend all of your time at your grandparents' place." Zach's hands were tightening, and I knew if I didn't intervene, this wasn't going to end good. So I carried out my usual routine. I attempted to prevent things from blowing up. I moved in between of them, meeting Kevin's gaze directly. "These are adolescent people, Kevin. They require their own area. They cannot just be made to spend time with others. They wish to be left alone." Kevin refused to accept it. "It's your fault," he angrily said. "You're treating them like royalty, fulfilling all of their desires. They now believe they are too excellent for their own family. You've placed themselves in the way of their siblings." I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. Following everything we had done for Mia and Zach, this individual was so bold as to say we were breaking up the family. "Kevin, it's not me that has been shoving them away." With a forceful yet steady tone, I spoke. "It's your fault, not ours, if Zach and Mia don't feel connected to their siblings. We have supported them, while you haven't." Kevin appeared as though he was going to blow apart. "Do you not feel like the hero in this whole situation? You believe you can purchase their affections simply because you are wealthy? That's not working, though. They are becoming resentful and hostile toward their own family as a result of you. This is the point at which I had to bite my tongue. My initial reaction was to berate him, to tell him bluntly what I thought of his parenting, his decisions, and his entire demeanor. However, I was aware that wouldn't benefit Zach and Mia. Instead, I inhaled deeply and added, "Kevin, this has nothing to do with money. It is about ensuring Zach and Mia's happiness and well-being. Instead of blaming us if they don't get along with their siblings, perhaps you can investigate the reason." By now, Zach was at his breaking point. He moved forward and took a position beside me. "It's not about Grandma and Grandpa, Dad. Because we look after our siblings all the time, we don't feel connected to them. They are not our parents. Cindy and you both are. However, you anticipate us acting as their constant babysitters. We've had enough of it." Kevin seemed astonished. It's obvious he wasn't prepared for Zach to confront him in that manner. It looked like he was about to give in for a split second. But then he became enraged once more. "Is that how you see it?" With a raised voice, he spoke. "Do you feel that you're overly qualified to lend a hand around the house? Zach, that's what family does. We look out for one another. However, you've been too preoccupied acting like the spoilt grandkid to give a damn." Zach was getting close to losing it, as I could see by the reddening of his face. However, before you could respond, Mia, who had remained silent throughout, spoke up. Gently but firmly she responded, "We're not spoilt, Dad. All we want is to stop being disregarded. We're simply you and Cindy spending all of your time with the small ones. They act as though we are unimportant. That being said, we enjoy spending time at Grandma and Grandpa's place since we feel important and valued there. My heart ached a little when I heard Mia say that. She was the reserved one all along, the person who concealed her emotions. However, it was clearly evident that she had been carrying this burden for a while. Kevin appeared as like he had been struck in the face. He was about to say something, but he held his tongue. For the very first time since his sudden entrance, he gave off an insecure vibe. I seized the chance to intervene once more. You can't keep blaming us for the current state of affairs, Kevin. I know this is difficult for you. Zach and Mia adore you, but they also need you to listen to them rather than just give them instructions. Kevin remained still for many more seconds, displaying a wide variety of emotions on his face, including rage, annoyance, and maybe even a hint of guilt. He simply shook his head and turned to face the door at the end. You've decided what to do. More to himself than to us, he mumbled. Now they have to make a decision. He slammed the door behind him as he rushed out of the home. After he was gone, the room remained silent for a while. Mia and Zach were shaken, as if they were still processing what had just transpired. My spouse touched Zach's shoulder. You did well, young one. Silently, he said. You defended your own interests. That is the important thing. Zach gave a nod, but it was clear he was still furious. Mia, too. Although none of us had intended for things to turn out this way, something seemed to have changed. After Zach and Mia defied their father for the first time, I believe they came to the realization that they could no longer tolerate things as they were. That night, we didn't really talk about it. We enjoyed a film together, consumed some meal. I made an effort to maintain the status quo, but I knew that my meeting with Kevin wasn't the end. This was only the start. 3 revisions. That confrontation with Kevin had not made matters any simpler. If anything, they became increasingly intricate. Kevin ceased all communication with us, aside from scheduling the visits with Zach and Mia. And he would only talk briefly even then. Chilly, as if allowing them to spend time with us was a favor. To be honest though, I was done attempting to sort things out with him. I could handle anything Kevin threw at us as long as Zach and Mia were pleased. That was my main priority. But what really caught me off guard was how much more open Zach and Mia became following that altercation. It was similar to the time they defied Kevin. At last they felt comfortable discussing all they had been keeping within. Those were some of the longer talks we had back then. The issues they were facing back home were far greater than I had imagined when they came to be with us. Zach said that he felt like he had to tread carefully around Kevin and Cindy all the time. Because it appeared like nothing he did would ever be enough. He was unsure of how to behave in his own home. He was either not helpful enough around the house or too far away from his half-siblings. Additionally, Kevin would correct him when he tried to assist for him. It was a lose-lose scenario. Although Mia didn't express it as much, I could tell it was on her mind as well. Cindy attempted to play the hip stepmother, she told me, but it always came across as false. Mia could see right through Cindy's attempts to persuade her to chat about things or go shopping with her. She was aware that Cindy wasn't acting in her best interests. Her motivation was to bring Kevin joy. It was that revelation that pained her the most. It wasn't as though Zach and Mia weren't interested in getting to know their half-siblings. It was simply not their feeling to belong in the new family. Kevin was making a lot of effort to construct. They didn't feel at home in their own house. Additionally, they withdrew farther, the harder Kevin pressed. Both they and we could see that they were stranded in a circumstance that they had not requested. Even though I detested hearing all of this, it strengthened my resolve to provide Zach and Mia with the necessary time and space. We made sure they didn't have to think about the mayhem at home while they were with us. I did not mean to take Kevin's position. Although I was certain it would never occur, I still wanted them to know they had a place where they could be themselves without any stress. Then one day, out of the blue, Kevin gave me a call. Since we hadn't spoken in person for weeks, I reasoned that it was crucial. He also had a distinct tone. Desperate, not furious. I sensed immediately that something had changed. He continued, almost as if it stung to confess, I need your help. I'm at a loss on what to do right now. It seems like the kids despise me since they won't listen to me. At first, I wasn't sure how to reply. I wanted to respond, well, what did you expect? To part of me, however, I refrained. Even though he most likely deserved a lecture, I knew he wasn't asking for one. Rather, I inquired, "What's happening?" On the other end of the line, he let out a deep sigh. Simply put, they're excluding me. Zach only engages in conversation with me when it pertains to practical matters. When Mia gets home, she hardly ever looks at me. Even though Cindy is making an effort, they are not warming up to her. I think I'm going to lose them. I sat back on the counter, attempting to take in all he was saying. Kevin had never exhibited any true vulnerability before. It was as though he had at last come to the realization that his attempts to control and push his children were failing and were negatively impacting their relationship. I responded in as neutral a tone as I could. "I'm not sure what you want me to say, Kevin. You made an attempt to push them into a situation they weren't prepared for. You can't just assume that they will comply." He answered, seeming annoyed. "I know. However, I'm working to remedy it. I simply have no idea how." I took a time to consider it. I wasn't really sure I wanted to become engaged. I honestly didn't know Kevin after everything he'd put us through, so it wasn't my place to correct his errors. Anything at all. However, the part of me that cared about Zach and Mia realized that I had to give it my best go if I had any hope of improving their situation. "Kevin, you must pay attention to them," I spoke, maintaining a steady tone. "Pay close attention. Asking people how they truly feel will help you stop telling them how they ought to feel. They are no longer little children. Teenagers, they have experienced a great deal. They need to know that you care about them and are there for them in addition to being their father." On the other end, there was a prolonged silence. He seemed to be processing what I was saying and making sense of it. "I simply don't want to part with them." When he did speak, it was almost a whisper. I answered, "That's up to you, Kevin. However, you must realize that they will not just return to you at your request. You need to regain their trust." Kevin didn't give another call for a time after that. I wasn't sure if he was genuinely following my counsel, or if he was simply too arrogant to acknowledge that he required more assistance. In any case, nothing changed significantly on our end. Zach and Mia seemed to be happy that they were still spending their weekends with us. However, I occasionally noticed that expression in their eyes, the one who said they were still handling matters they weren't prepared to discuss. Zach then approached me with something unexpected after approximately a month. He sat down at the kitchen table across from me and said, "Grandma, I've been pondering. Moving in with you and Grandpa is my desire." I blinked in surprise. "By that, do you mean full-time?" Zach gave a nod. "Yes, I am no longer able to take it home. Dad is simple, as is Cindy. It's excessive. Mia has also been discussing it. It on both of our minds." I was at a loss for words. Naturally, my desire was for them to remain with us, should that be their requirement. However, I realized that having Kevin live with us full-time would make things much more complicated. That would be his breaking point. "Have you discussed this with your father?" I questioned warily. Zach gave a headshake. "Not quite yet. Before I raised the subject, I wanted to be sure it was even a possibility. Grandma, I can't stay there anymore. I simply am unable to." I could tell he was serious when I glanced at him and noticed the resolve in his eyes. This was not your typical teenage disobedience. Zach was choosing what he needed for his personal health at this point. I quote, "I'll speak with Papa. We'll find out how to bring it up with your dad," I added gently. With a look of relief on his face, Zach nodded. "Regards, grandmother." And that's when I came to a realization. Zach and Mia recognized where they belonged, despite Kevin's best efforts to drive us away or guilt-trip us into doing things his way. All that mattered was that they understood they had us on their side. Story 3. One of our twins says he wants a paternity test after he abandoned us, not his. Fine. Let me begin by stating that everything with my ex-partner Alex is a whole mess, and since our breakup it's really been one thing after another. Like when he left me when I was expecting the twins, I thought things were bad, but it was only the beginning. He just made the most absurd demand too yet. He requests that Layla, our youngest, have a paternity test. And why? She doesn't seem to resemble him. He now believes she is not his and that I cheated on him. Allow me to elaborate on this a little. For a few years, Alex and I were together and everything seemed good until it didn't. He began to emotionally distance himself, to assist with very little, and to continually find excuses to remain late at work when I became pregnant with the twins, Luke and Layla. I was too preoccupied with managing the pregnancy and trying to keep things together to notice the warning signals. He revealed that he was leaving while I was around 6 months along. In that very moment, he has vanished. He did not even stay to see the baby's birth. Even harder, I had to accomplish everything by myself. Luke resembled a smaller version of Alex when he emerged. There's no doubting that. Layla, however, has somewhat distinct features and darker curls in her hair. She resembles my grandma more than anybody else. She was mixed race with a white surname. At first, I didn't give it much thought. Although there are many different ways that babies might appear, it seems like Alex, and more significantly, his new wife Fiona, are making a huge deal out of it. Fiona. I could write a novel on her, man. She is the woman Alex left me for, and ever since she entered my life, she has made an effort to force her way into my children's lives by behaving as though she is their mother or something. She, quote, is not liked by the kids, which, let's be honest, makes sense. The woman your dad left your mom for, who would want her? Fiona persistently implores them to refer to her as their mother, but they steadfastly decline. It's not even necessary for me to speak. Now, fast forward to when the kids are old enough to see through the BS. Alex suddenly starts contacting me, claiming Layla isn't his when the twins are 5 years old. I initially believed it to be a joke. She's your daughter, buddy. You were present. Not really there, but you get what I mean. When she was born, our marriage was still intact. Additionally, the birth certificate bears your name. But now he's pressing for a paternity test, since Fiona doesn't think Layla looks like him or Luke. Yes, without a doubt, Fiona is solely to blame for this. The fact that Alex has never had trouble paying child support is what truly irritates me, but he's always carried it out. I'm aware that it's not motivated by kindness. He did it mostly to avoid getting into legal problems. However, he has been attempting to reduce the amount recently, stating that he is having financial difficulties. Yes, perhaps he wouldn't have that problem if he hadn't wasted all of his money on whatever pricey pastime he was into at the time. Regardless, Maggie, his sister, informed me about the entire paternity issue before Alex even tried to notify me. In all of this, Maggie has been my ally. She is the only person who is still in contact with me from Alex's side. She informed me that Alex and Fiona have been circulating flyers requesting that Layla's paternity be investigated, threatening to stop him from receiving child support if the results show that she is not his. She also revealed that their financial issues have returned, something I had already begun to fear given that Dad had stopped bringing the kids on the weekends. He says it's because he needs to put in more hours at work, but I know it goes deeper than that. When I challenged Alex about it, he gave a ridiculous reason. Layla doesn't resemble either you or me. Like, buddy, genetics are wacky, he remarked. Not every child will be an exact replica of you. Even when I brought up my grandma, he seemed uninterested. He believes without question that I cheated on him. Now he's footing the bill for the kid of another man. I informed him up front that he would need to take me to court if he wanted a paternity test. He can't intimidate me into doing anything. I'm not here for him since I know he's just trying to use this as an excuse to not pay for his own child. He tried playing the "I can't afford" court card, saying that by making him pay for a kid who isn't his, I'm holding his money hostage. Yes, exactly. But after I told him to take me to court, things became worse. He began berating me on Facebook. Although Maggie emailed me screenshots, I don't follow him. He is accusing me of tricking him into signing the birth certificate and making him pay for a child that is not his. He is claiming this to everybody who will listen. The dude is crazy, I promise. When Lila was born, he wasn't even in the hospital. However, his name was immediately added to the certificate since we were still married. He's acting as though I manufactured it now. Naturally, his ignorant buddies who believe they are experts have been drawn to his Facebook tirades. To clear my name and make things easy for Alex, one of them even had the audacity to write me and suggest that I should just obtain a paternity test. Yes, since I'm the one who's causing difficulties in this situation. Incredible. I've given up on returning his calls. Should he wish to speak with me, email or text messaging is required so that I can keep a record of everything. I don't think he won't misrepresent anything. I've dealt with his nonsense for years, and I've learnt my lesson. Furthermore, I'm rather certain that Layla isn't the real reason behind this whole incident. It has to do with money. With him, money is always the main topic. It's likely that Fiona is whispering in his ear to quit losing money and paying child support. I'm so sick of putting up with his bullshit at this point. He went while I was pregnant, he doesn't spend much time with the kids, and now he's attempting to change the course of events by saying one of them isn't his. It's actually rather pitiful. But he's in for another thing if he believes that I'm going to back down and let him off the hook. This quarter, I'm going to fight him, not a court. I'm not going to be bullied by him or Fiona. I am aware of the truth. Therefore, they are free to spew all the lies they choose. Alex feels that too, deep inside. That's where we are at, then. Now all I have to do is wait for him to back off or threaten legal action against me. To be honest, I kind of hope it's the latter. Let's watch him attempt to defend this entire mess in court. All right, so after the entire paternity test incident with Alex, things took a different turn. After the way I shut him down in our previous talk, I figured maybe, just maybe, he would calm down and give it some more thinking. Logically speaking. That is, if I hadn't cheated on him. I mean, there's no need in prolonging this mess. Naturally, though, Alex is not a rational thinker. He has a victim mentality. And he snaps when he finds himself in a tight spot. He didn't approach me directly this time. Oh no, that would be far too cowardly of him. Instead, he launched a full-fledged smear campaign against me with Fiona. It began modestly, with tiny social media barbs. Subtleties that only those closest to us could comprehend. However, things quickly got out of hand. He wasn't happy to merely pull me onto the internet. He needed to start including his family. His father, Phil, called me one day. I kind of like Phil now. Even after the divorce, he has consistently been fair to me. He gets along well with the children and has never allowed Alex's turmoil to interfere with their bond. I so assumed it was just a routine check-in when he called. I had no idea he would be so agitated, virtually bellowing at the absurd things Alex had been telling the family about me. For the past 2 years of our marriage, it seems that Alex had been informing everyone that I was having an affair. 2 years, really? And with more than just any old dude. He said that I had an affair with Steve, my previous boss. Steve is first of all a married father of children, and all we were co-workers. When we weren't working, we hardly ever spoke. Second comma, I lost Alex. Thus it's completely absurd that he is accusing me of cheating. Although Phil was aware that it was all nonsense, Alex had been telling everyone about it, including Phil's relatives. My in-laws were starting to suspect that there could be more to Alex's tale than I was telling them, so I had to try to patch things up with them. It quote, funny how easily people who aren't personally engaged may jump to the worst conclusions about you. Some of them contacted me, seeming extremely worried, but in reality, they were only looking for more information. You are aware of this kind. Those who feign concern but are only looking for rumor fodder. And Fiona was the other one. Whoa, Guy. She is enamored by this. She's diving right in, supporting Alex at every turn, behaving as though she's been in the photo for more than 5 minutes. I understand her dislike for me. We were never going to be friends, obviously, but this was petty on an entirely new level. She even went so far as to claim that by getting pregnant with the twins, I was attempting to trap Alex. Similar to what? His leaving me during my pregnancy was not something I had planned. I desired none of this. I suppose it seems sense, though, for her to hold me responsible for all that went wrong, to exacerbate the situation. On Facebook, Alex began sharing cryptic posts in which he avoided giving specific names, but made it clear to everyone who he was referring to. Things like how some individuals are eager for the truth to surface because they are finally being exposed for who they truly are. He would respond to his buddies' comments with a slew of winky face emojis, something like, "You'll see soon enough." I couldn't help but feel upset whenever someone showed me a screenshot, even if it was absurd. Then, out of the blue, I receive a message from one of Alex's buddies who I hardly know. He adds something along the lines of, "You ought to just get a paternity test. It will silence everyone," as though it were that easy. I felt like hurling my phone across the space. It goes beyond the test. It has to do with the idea. Since his life isn't turning out the way he wants it to, Alex can't just accuse me of cheating. I have no idea why I'm such a horrible thing. Furthermore, I owe Fiona no peace of mind at all. This is when the crazy part started though. Alex went beyond simply disparaging me and demanding a paternity test. Oh no. He made the decision to escalate the situation by entangling Luke and Lila in it. It wasn't shocking that he hadn't shown up to pick them up for his planned weekend away, as he had been shady lately. However, he really had the audacity to inform me when I phoned to find out what was going on. Until you show that Layla is yours, I won't take her. I was stunned for a moment. He was actually torturing our daughter for some ridiculous notion. He entered his own mind. You don't get to pick and choose which kids you choose dependent on your mood, I informed him bluntly. He was indifferent though. Reiterating his commitment, he said he wouldn't take her until the exam was completed. I cracked up. I informed him. All right, you also don't get to be Luke's father if you don't want to be Layla's. I refuse to engage in these games with him. I won't allow him to play such mind games with the kids, leading them to believe that they are only deserving of love if they live up to some arbitrary ideal he established. He will be in both of their lives if he is to be in either one. Alex, though, didn't consider it serious. He hung up on me after laughing it off. When I phoned Phil again after that and told him what had happened, he was understandably incensed with Alex. He promised to speak with him, but I knew nothing would really change. Alex is unyielding, so once Fiona has persuaded him of something, he will not listen to reason. The most detrimental aspect? Luke began to inquire. Kids are brilliant, even at 5 years old. He sensed that something was wrong when Alex failed to appear. He questioned why Daddy didn't want to see them, and all I could do was sit there and attempt to explain as simply as I could without giving the impression that Alex was running away from them. I promised him we would meet his father soon, but he was busy right now. But Luke didn't seem to be persuaded, and that hurt my feelings. I could already see how this would harm the children in the long run, and that just deepened my hatred for Alex. My only wish was for them to maintain a positive relationship with their father, and it's his inflated ego that's causing the mess. Thank goodness Layla is still too small to comprehend any of this, but I'm sure the time will come when she'll question why her father behaved in that manner. And what am I meant to explain to her? That her father believed she wasn't his and didn't want to see her? I should never have to have that talk with my kid. Here we are then. I'm simply trying to make things as regular as possible for the kids, and Alex is still hanging this ridiculous paternity test over my head. It wears me out. It seems like a fresh battle every day. I'm simply waiting for the next absurd antics to happen. Fiona and Alex tug. However, one thing is certain. I'm not going to give up. It's okay if he wants to take this to court. But he's not going to get away with this nonsense till then. Okay, so this is when things really got crazy. Alex had determined that he wouldn't visit the kids unless I approved of Layla's paternity test. I didn't think things could get much worse. Okay, maybe he'll get over his ridiculous behavior and quit including the kids in this, I thought to myself. Now, though, Alex finds it difficult to let things go. Rather of becoming more composed, he continued to stray into insane terrain. Suddenly, I receive a message from Alex's sister, Maggie. Since all of this turmoil began, she's the only one of his family who has remained in touch with me, and she's always been honest with me. Maggie then texts me to tell me that Alex and Fiona are preparing a lawsuit to take full custody of Luke from me. Yes, it is correct. Luke alone. They seem to have come to the conclusion that they don't want anything to do with Layla since she isn't his. However, Luke, in their deranged logic, he's obviously Alex's. They therefore desire him to themselves. I swear, for a split second, my brain just stopped working when I read that message. I was at a loss for what to think. How does one select which child is worth fighting for? Furthermore, is that even logical? However, Alex is the monarch of bad choices. I suppose this one was no exception. I immediately gave Maggie a call to ask for further information. She informs me that Alex has been spreading the word to others that I'm mentally ill and incapable of parenting both of my children by myself. Now, since he left me while I was pregnant, Alex has hardly been around. If anyone has been following track here, to get Luke away from me, he's been trying to cast me as some unfit mom, even though I've been raising the kids alone, and they're doing fantastic. Maggie claimed to have heard Fiona discussing how Luke would benefit from living with them, and that they would make me appear to be failing the kids. Fiona has no acquaintance with Luke. Let's speak honestly. The kids have informed me how little Fiona talks to them every time they've returned from their weekends spent with Alex. If not, it's to dictate to them. She isn't a maternal figure, regardless of her desire to act the role. After I hung up with Maggie on the phone, for a minute, I just sat there, furious. Alex was petty, I knew that, but this was really, really bad. I could already feel my temper rising, and all I could think about was how much harm this would bring to Luke in the event that they carried it out. How do you tell a 5-year-old that his father doesn't want his sister? Only him. How can you prevent him from thinking that he is to blame and feeling guilty? I made the decision to act on my own behalf. In this custody battle, I wasn't going to wait around for Alex to make the first move. I began recording everything. Although I had previously been recording our talks, I now took care to include every single detail. If he was going to play dirty, I even made notes on the days he missed his weekends with the kids. I intended to be prepared. However, Alex made another move before I could even begin to be ready for this custody farce. He arrived at my residence. I'm not kidding. He simply knocked on my door like if we were still friendly or something. I knew something was wrong as soon as I saw him standing there. He was that arrogant. I'm going to cause a ruckus. Examine his countenance. What are your desires? I questioned, getting irritated even before he spoke. He got right to the subject without wasting any time. He said, I'm here to talk about Luke. You are obviously unable to manage both of the children, therefore we need to come up with a new plan. Even though I could feel my fury building, I made an effort to remain composed. Alex, what are you talking about? Everything has been going really well for me. It's you who can't even keep to your weekend schedule. He grinned as though he was savoring every moment of it. Luke should move in full-time with Fiona and me, in my opinion. He should have a secure home. And well, let's pretend that you're not really offering that. I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. Do you really believe that removing Luke from his sister will bring him stability? Right now? Are you serious? Alex shrugged as if it didn't really matter. Why should I worry that Layla isn't my child? Luke needs his dad to stay out of your problem. I cracked up, my disarray. You abandoned us. It is you who has had the least amount of involvement in their lives. And now you want to pretend to be your father of the year while you kidnap Luke? Be sincere, Alex. He was obviously loving how much he was getting under my skin as he crossed his arms. My attorney and I have already spoken. We are requesting custody. You're not being asked. I am informing you. I realized then that there could be no argument with him. In his mind, he knew he would prevail. That he could simply swoop in and take Luke from me without any hesitation. I confess it felt fairly gratifying to slam the door in his face. I got in touch with my own lawyer the following day. I had no intention of letting Alex walk in and take my son away. As we discussed the case's specifics, my attorney gave me confidence that I had a strong case. Alex was going to lose because of his lack of participation, his reluctance to take Layla, and his effort to harm me by using custody. And what do you know? The crowning achievement. Alex didn't even have the money to pursue his custody dispute. Later on, Maggie informed me that he had been bluffing in an attempt to intimidate me into relinquishing Luke without a formal court battle. Not that he had gotten a lawyer yet. All he wanted to do was scare me. Typical action from Alex. Therefore, his little custody act really accomplished nothing after all that. However, the harm had already occurred. I detested that Luke and Layla were being forced into this. Even if they were aware of the strain. They weren't treated fairly, and I knew that Alex would eventually do something else to cause additional problems. But for now, I'm on high alert. I'm keeping track of everything, recording everything, and making sure I'm ready for whatever move Alex and Fiona decide to take next. I will not back down, and I will not allow them to continue to ruin my children's life. It's tiring, but there's nothing more I can do. Dealing with Alex's nonsense is simply another day in the office, but I'm prepared for whatever comes next. You would think that things would settle down after all the drama. What with Alex attempting to acquire custody of Luke and failing miserably? How many times can a guy mess up his own life, really? As it happens, the number is whatever it takes to make him feel like a victim. And he went to whole new absurdities this time. Luke's return after a weekend spent with Alex and Fiona was the beginning of it. and immediately I sensed that something was wrong. When Luke comes back, he usually talks a lot and tells me everything he did. Typically, it involves activities like playing video games or visiting parks. But he was silent this time, almost as if he was afraid or uneasy. I attempted to inquire about his weekend experiences, but all he did was shrug and say it was all right. I realized then that something was wrong. I questioned him again later that night as I was putting him to bed. "Luke, is there something bothering you? You haven't said much at all today." At last, he revealed himself. He whispered as he glanced down at his blanket. "Layla isn't my real sister according to my father. I swear my heart stopped." "Luke, what do you mean?" With those large, innocent eyes, he cast a quick glance at me and spoke. "Layla doesn't look like him," so he stated. "Thus she doesn't belong in our family." I was struggling to remain composed. Our 5-year-old son was informed by Alex that his sister wasn't truly his sister. I had never felt anything like the fury I felt at that precise time. In order not to frighten Luke, I had to inhale deeply, but I was about to blow up within. I said, trying not to panic, "Lucy, that's Layla, your sister. You have a twin in her. Inside my tummy, you both grew at the same time. Notwithstanding what others may think, you will always remain family." He gave a nod, but it was clear he was still perplexed. Why wouldn't he be? Doubt was being sown in his mind by his own father. It wasn't fair either. Luke wasn't treated fairly, and Layla wasn't treated fairly either. I was furious as I sat on the couch after getting Luke comfortable for the night. Even though I knew I had to talk to Alex about it, I was kind of looking forward to it, as I knew it would just lead to more arguments. Even yet, I couldn't allow him to continue feeding our son false information. I reached for my phone and texted him, "We must speak. How in the heck did you inform Luke about Layla?" Although I wasn't expecting a response straight away, my phone buzzed practically instantly. Naturally, he refuted all of it, claiming he had no idea what they were discussing. "It's not what I said at all. Traditional. Alex, refute whatever you say." But I was not buying it. Luke had no justification for inventing anything of the sort. I told Alex as much, and all he could do was backpedal, claiming that by treating Layla like his sister when she is clearly not, I was surely confusing Luke. For me, it was it. After I phoned him, I didn't even give him a chance to say hello before berating him. "You have no right to speak to our son in that manner. What type of father attempts to incite his child's animosity toward his own sister?" Alex attempted to downplay it, behaving as like he wasn't engaging in any kind of heinous manipulation. "I was only being honest with him. He's mature enough to see that Layla isn't truly related to me. I was so angry I could not stand it. Like it or not, she's a member of your family. Her birth certificate lists you. Since the beginning, you have been providing child support for her. Give up attempting to manipulate Luke's thoughts just so you may avoid having to deal with the truth." He retaliated by arguing. However, I interrupted him. "Until you quit doing this, you won't be taking Luke or Layla. You may stop attempting to incite them against one another." That briefly silenced him. Then he pulled off his typical victim routine. "Oh, so you're going to hide the kids from me going forward? Good. Real mature." I was not going to allow him to turn the tables. "No, you won't be denied them. I am shielding them from your foolishness. You don't deserve to see either of them if you can't be a good parent to them both." That was it, and I was okay with his hanging up on me. I knew this wasn't done, but I wasn't in the mood to hear any more of his excuses. I had a suspicion that Alex would return with something much worse because he wasn't the kind to just drop everything. As predicted, when the next weekend arrived, Alex failed to appear to pick up the children. Even while I wasn't shocked, Luke in particular felt the pain. Despite what had transpired, he had been looking forward to seeing his dad since, as a 5-year-old, he still doesn't completely grasp what was going on. However, I had to inform him that his father would not be arriving. The expression on his face almost made me cry. He merely looked at me for a moment before giving me a tough assembly nod. He answered, "It's okay, Mommy," but his displeasure was evident in his eyes. I took a seat that evening and put everything that had transpired in writing. I was aware that I needed all of this to be recorded in case Alex attempted to perform another legal prank on me. I needed to be strategic about it, but I also wasn't going to let him get away with this. I could not just lose my temper with him every time he did anything terrible. despite my intense desire to do so. Alex eventually texted me the next week, behaving as if nothing had occurred. "Luke, may I come get him this weekend?" he wrote without even bringing up Layla. Without even thinking twice, I responded. "Either you choose one or the other. I refuse to engage in your games." That naturally enraged him, and he attempted to justify his actions by saying that he needed to wait for the results of the paternity test before dealing with Layla. However, I didn't back down. When you're ready to become a father, it's not up to you. It's either you're not or you are. His remark made it clear that he wasn't satisfied with my demand, but I wasn't concerned at this time. If he didn't want to take charge and be a father to both of his children, I wasn't going to stand by and allow him keep acting like this. Back then, I was more than capable of managing things on my own. Besides, I'd been doing it since the beginning. And so, here we are. It's been a while since I've heard from Alex, which is sort of a relief. However, I'm aware that this isn't the end. He'll return with a new strategy and an excuse, but I'll be prepared. I will no longer allow him to play with my children's life. Furthermore, I will not allow him to continue treating Layla as though she is an outsider. The three of us are a family, and it won't alter regardless of what Alex says or does. Okay, so let's get started. You would think that after all that has happened, Alex would finally realize his folly and stop talking like this. No, that isn't how he operates. He manages to amaze me just when I thought he couldn't possibly be much worse. By now, I ought to have known better, but this time he truly went too far. Maggie sent out another text to kick things off. She's been my go-to source for all the details about Alex. To be honest, she's probably the only sensible person he has left in his life. I knew something wasn't going to go well when I received a message from her on an incongruous Tuesday afternoon. She informed me that Alex and Fiona were preparing a significant, maybe legal project. It seems like they were preparing to request full custody once more, but they would make the argument that I wasn't qualified to raise the children. I know I've stated it before, but Alex doesn't really spend much time with his children. Other than attempting to play faux mother when it suits her, Fiona has no contact with them. And now they're going to try to use my unfit status as an excuse to take the kids away from me. The irony made me chuckle uncontrollably, but I was also really angry at the moment. This was more than a weekend no-show or petty Facebook tirade. They were targeting my capacity to care for my children. My children. I didn't spend any time. I immediately contacted my lawyer and gave him the full rundown of everything Maggie had told me. Fortunately, I had been documenting all of Alex's absurd actions, including missing weekends and saying things like Layla wasn't his. Even though my attorney informed me that I was in a strong position, I felt like I had been hit in the stomach. I was sickened by the thought of having to battle for my right to retain my kids, no matter how good my case was. The following several days passed in a whirlwind of appointments with my lawyer, obtaining further paperwork, and attempting to carry on as if Luke and Layla were routine. Even though the strain was inside of me consuming me, I didn't want them to feel it. Each time I took a glance at them, I experienced an intense feeling of needing to protect them from the impending storm that Alex was bringing. Then it took place. Alex claimed that I was emotionally unstable and could not maintain a stable home environment when she submitted the paperwork for the custody case. As I went over the documents, the falsehoods kept stacking up one after another. He dared to accuse me of causing the kids' alienation from him and of utilizing them as tools to harm him. Yes, since I've been the one refusing to take both of the kids and missing weekends. Amazing. My attorney exuded confidence, but I wasn't so sure. Because courts are capricious, it terrified me to consider losing custody of my children, even for a small amount of time. But I knew I had to keep my composure, since Alex would take advantage of any weakness in me. Our first court date was a few weeks later. I felt like I was going to pass out as soon as I walked inside the courtroom. Naturally, Alex was there looking as arrogant as ever, as though he had already triumphed. Beside him sat Fiona, looking elegantly put together as though she were attending a formal function, not a hearing on custody. You may assume they were the ideal family based on the way they were behaved, only attempting to save poor Luke from his awful mother. However, something unexpected happened after that. Alex's falsehoods began to come apart as we progressed through the process. Using all the facts at our disposal, my lawyer did a fantastic job of demonstrating how inconsistent Alex's engagement with the children's lives had been. The emails, the messages, and the lost weekends. Everything was in front of the magistrate. Additionally, I noticed Alex's confidence waning as the hearing continued. Fiona as well. She began to fidget as if she was aware that they were losing. The judge's question to Alex about why he wasn't standing up for both Luke and Layla was the pivotal moment. For him, that was the moment when everything broke down. He attempted to provide a half-baked explanation, saying that he didn't think Layla was his and that it wasn't worth the struggle for a child who might not be. The judge rejected it. When she inquired as to whether he had completed a paternity test, Alex said that he hadn't. The game was ended. The judge did not mince words. She really ripped into him, reminding him that choosing to be a parent isn't something you do for convenience's sake. He ought to have fought for both children's custody if he was going to battle for one. That was the moment his entire case crumbled. It was evident on his face. He knew that was it. In the end, the court made a decision that favored me. Not only did Alex's bid to obtain sole custody fail, but the judge also mandated that he continue to pay Luke's and Layla's child support. Though I didn't feel like celebrating, it was a big relief. It had been a tiring process all along, and I knew it wasn't truly done. Alex would ultimately probably devise a new plan. He is simply that way. I was okay with Alex and Fiona leaving the courthouse after the hearing without saying anything to me. Besides, I didn't want to speak with them. Knowing that my children were remaining with me, where they belonged, all I wanted was to go home and give them a big embrace. I immediately let out a huge breath of relief as I sat down with Luke and Layla at home. I kept the specifics of what had transpired from them. I didn't want to add to the mess they were already in by dragging them in. However, I made sure they understood how much I cared for them and how determined I was to stand up for them. That quote the current state of affairs. Although Alex is currently out of tricks, I'm not foolish enough to believe that he is. In a few months, he'll undoubtedly come up with some fresh angle. But for now, I'm ready for him. I've discovered the hard way that being a mom requires constant preparation for the unanticipated, particularly when interacting with someone as poisonous as Alex. But I'm not going to back down, no matter what he throws at me next. These are my children, and I will stop at nothing to protect them from his trash.